Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Gül. It's so nice to be here in Bulgaria. I'm visiting today from San Francisco, coming all the way from the other side. No, thanks. And we have a couple of talks before me talking about WebXR, VR, and AR, but we will talk specifically about the how do we implement on the web today. So you can find me on Twitter as ice something, because it's really hard to spell my name. And I'm a Google developer expert for the web technologies and the Angular team. And I'm always happy to have some questions on Twitter as well. So we will talk about the new APIs, the WebXR device APIs, what they are today, and go through some of the tools that are super helpful. And one of them just came out today. And specifically, one tool has been very helpful to me, which is 3JS. It's been around for a long time now to create 3D experiences on the web. And specifically, I will talk about that. You can find the slides on Bitly, WebXR 2018 DR for DevReach. And you can find my demos on GitHub. There are multiple of them, but Ice Labs is the one that has some Angular-specific demos, and there are some HTML as well. So how many of you saw the other talks about WebVR? I mean, VR and AR in general? OK, a few of you, because there was in detail explanation of what augmented realities and virtual realities. So we are in reality right now, the real reality. And on the other end of the spectrum, what we call the augmented reality is when we extend our reality with new objects. As you can see in this video, there's actually no dinosaur in my room, but I'm able to create some 3D images and merge it with the stream that I'm getting from the media APIs. And on the other hand, virtual reality is when you can get immersed and forget about your real world and forget about your coworkers, what they're doing, and run away from your reality. It's a great time for running away from your reality. And it's not just for fun and games. It has a lot of real-life applications, and one of them, very important one, is medical applications. And this is what happens in the US today. If you're having a surgery on something that you have two of, you really have to make sure that they're operating on the right one. And people come and ask you till the very last minute, is this the one that we are operating on? And that's very nerve-wracking, really. But just a few weeks ago, augmented reality was approved by Food and Drug Administration in the US. This is amazing news, because now we are able to create HoloLens experiences to be used in surgeries, and nobody has to ask you many times. VR has a lot of implementation in the medical world. One of them is that 3D images. If you've ever taken any MRs, you have layer by layer image of your brain. And if a doctor is looking for some abnormality, I would really want them to look deep and immerse themselves in this experience. So why is it important today? This year has been a great year for especially augmented reality. VR has been around much longer. And there are hundreds of millions of devices today that are available with these capabilities that we are not fully taking advantage of. And immersive experiences deliver content when it's important in the right time and right place with the AR experiences, and very, very immersive experiences with the VR. And it's so much better in native applications. We have so much more capabilities, like having anchors. You can leave some 3D object in one spot, and then another person can come and find it in the exact spot. And the rendering capabilities are so much better. But these are all coming slowly to the web. And web is very important, because web is for everyone. If you're creating for web, you don't have to be dependent on a few companies deciding on if your application is good enough or should be delivered to other people. There are a few technologies, few APIs that we're using for creating any 3D experiences on the web. WebGL is one of them, and it's been highly supported on most of the browsers. But WebXR is pretty new. It's actually, unfortunately, not supported in many browsers. It's very experimental at the moment. So what can we do? Can we still create some experiences on the web? There are a few things that we could do. For example, with Chrome, you can enable some of the flags. And the newer flags are the WebXR, WebXR hit test, which allows you to detect some surfaces, and experimental tools. Not only that, Chrome also allows you to be the one who's leading and makes it very easy for you to create these experiences by signing you up for urgent trials. If you sign up for urgent trials for a limited time, your users, when they go to your web page, these flags will be automatically enabled, and they won't have to know what to do. The other cool thing is the WebXR polyfills. So WebVR had very different APIs until a few years ago. Now WebXR is the new one, and it's not implemented in most of the browsers, and some of the browsers implemented the older version of the VR APIs. By using the WebXR polyfills, you're able to get over this limitation as well. And lastly, I think this is more important, we can have progressive experiences. If your user doesn't have any AR or VR enabled device, you can give them a 3D experience. It's been available everywhere, and so they can click over, they can interact with it through their mouse. And if they have XR or VR, they can go to the immersive experience, or they can have the AR experience. And you can give the same experience in different places. So, and we have amazing tooling already, because most of these 3D tools were available for any kind of 3D experiences, mostly games. And now we have these editors where you can just drag and drop and create very easily these experiences. But this also comes with few limitations. You're using open source, well, Play Canvas itself is an open source project, but I believe you have to pay to use it. But they do really make it very easy. There are tons of other tools, but these are the ones that I find it very useful and very easy to use. And Scapic is a new one. It's also drag and drop, and easily you can start to create a VR experience. You don't even have to code. And if you're going to extend our realities, we have to have some 3D models. And if you don't want just the knowledge, just a 2D experience. And Poly is a website which has a lot of free models, and I believe developed by Google, where you can download some models and use it in your code. But also it has a developer API, which makes it really, really easy for you to give options to your user to search for these models and add it to the environments. And Sketchfab is another one. So these are the development tools, but I know you want to code. And the other two tools that I am really big fan of, one of them is A-Frame. It's a declarative language where you can create AR and VR experiences very easily. And lastly, 3JS. 3JS has been around for a long time, much longer than A-Frame. It's not declarative, and it's not as easy to use as A-Frame, but it's super flexible, and it gives you a lot of choices when it comes to creating an experience. And what came out today is model loader web components. Whatever application you have, now you have a web component developed by Google, where you can give any asset and render in your application, and you don't have to have much. So These are all cool, but we want to do a little bit more than that. And 3JS is my favorite tool. As I mentioned, it's very flexible and it's very, very performant. And it has a great community where you can find a lot of examples and code samples. And the code itself is easy to read, actually. So let's be a good developer. Write pseudocode first. So this part of the this pseudocode works for any XR experiences. This is true for any experience that you are going to create for AR or VR. And it's a little bit different to think about. But we have created, lots of experiences with user interaction. And if you keep an open mind, this is not that much different. One thing we have to do, first thing we have to do is check if our device is enabled, XR enabled. And not only that, we might need to check some specific things like AR is available. Once we have that, any kind of AR or VR experience has to start with a click event. You can't just go directly to the experience. Well, you can do it on the VR, but that's also not a very good user experience because you don't know if your user does have the device. And if they don't, they just see this darkness. Once we are sure that we want to go on, we do have the capabilities. We start our session, the XR session, and then we constantly animate our scene over and over, which is on every XR frame. We do this because every time we move, we have a different point of view that we have to render our scene again and again. And that's why it's very, very important to have very performant applications. So if we dive into it, Navigator you might be familiar with. It's checking our device, what kind of device we are on. And in this particular case, we have to check for the XR and request the device. What kind of device do we have? And does our device support the capabilities that we want? In AR's specific case, this is one of the flags that we enabled at the beginning, request hit test. So this is the one that checks if we are hitting a surface that's available to us to render anything. Once we have our device and we make sure that we have all the capabilities, we can start our session. And well, we started when we click on the Let's Go button. And what we do is create a WebGL rendering environment that we are going to render our 3D experiences. And we will give our device to that WebGL context, which is a canvas context. Once we have that, our session will have a base layer, which will render in maybe on top of the media stream, if it's an AR experience, and on a 3D canvas, if it's a VR experience. And every time, well, once the session is started, we check for our frame of reference, and we put the user to the eye level, and most of the time to the center of the world that you are creating. If you are in a 3D space, this is very important because you might put a object somewhere, but your user might not know where it is because it might be behind them. But most of the cases where we are is the center of the universe, and everything is on the eye level. So once we have the reference, we start our animation and we say we are ready to create the animation. So request animation frame is very important. It's very much like the normal request animation frame if you ever used it, but there is a difference in this case, and the sessions XR request animation frame is specific to device rendering capabilities. What it's trying to do is try to render every frame that you have 60 times per second or higher to have a very smooth experience. one other thing that we check is the pose. So where are we standing, and what is the tilt position that we have? So we have 6 degrees of movement, rotation, in any way. And we have to check that we have a pose, nothing has failed so far, and then we draw on top of that pose, depending on where we are. Because in this case, we are in the position of the camera. Wherever we look is where we are going to render. And once you start your session, other things that you can add to have more reality is, one of them is shadows and shadow maps. When you are creating an AR experience, the object's shadow makes it kind of blend, makes it look really real. But the unfortunate thing right now, at the moment, we do not have that much of information on the web to know what kind of lighting we have in our surrounding and our camera specifications. This is where native applications are so much better. But it's in the works. I'm sure we will have much more in the future. And once we have the layers, we add we can add new objects to our scene. So in this case, this is adding to what we have, a reticle object. I think. So 3JS, we are able to create these 3D objects, and I wanted to give you a very fast overview of how to create these objects, but I do have another video that you can watch. What we have is the geometry definitions if you want to create basic geometry, not a model that you are importing somewhere else. That could be a sphere or any kind of particle or any kind of not very complex shape. So the geometry is the definition that you have, and the material defines how the light bounces off of those objects. So material is, the objects is usually very simple, but materials can bring so much life to our objects. And the mesh is where we put these two together, the material definition that we have and the geometry definition, and put it into an object, and that will create our mesh. So if you want to learn more, there is a video from a few years back, but these concepts haven't changed at all. And on my slides, I hope you remember the link for the slides. I have a lot of resources, a lot of links put into it, because it's so much information to grasp on a very little time, but it's really nice to know where to go and where to find things. So these are some of the resources to learn about the materials and how to give more depth to your objects. And most of the time, simple objects, simple meshes don't do the trick for us. So we want to load really cool models. And Poly is a great source. I mean, the reason it's very good is that it has low poly, which means low. It's not low quality, but it's optimized for the web. And it has the API, where you can get a Poly API key and load your model just by using the URL. So let's go and take a look where. Oh. Wait, not here. So these are all of the available models that you have. Some of them are much better for simpler experiences, but you can take a look and try to bring any of them. Once you have the object, you can add it to your scene. So our scene is a JavaScript object in itself, and every mesh that we create has to be added to our scenes to be able to render. And lastly, just want to give you a little overview of how we create the user interactions. With VR devices, especially the very complex ones, we might have a hand device, which I have it for Daydream. Then it's very easy to create click events, user interactions, but we also wanted to be able to see the things that we see and create the same experience for very low end, like Google Cardboard and other devices. And raycasting is a great way to cheat user interaction, cheat having any controller device. What it does is basically it shoots a ray from the camera, which is where your user is, and looks to try to calculate if it's hitting any object or any surfaces. So here we define our click event with the raycaster. Raycaster is an object in 3JS, and set it from the camera. So you can set this ray from any object, right? So from one object, it could have been a gun, for example, and you might be trying to shoot something. In that case, you would set it from where the gun is and attach it to that object. But in most cases, if you're trying to imitate the user click event, what you do is set it from the camera. And in every animation cycle, you check if you're hitting anything from my direction to anything in front of me, and then do whatever you like with that interaction. One thing I really, really like about the augmented reality and user interaction is using the audio. And this is one of the things that we don't really realize. I mean, we don't really think as augmented reality applications, but extending our reality with audio is very much a part of augmented reality. But you can also use spatial audio to create more believable 3D VR experiences. So resonance spatial audio is one library open sourced by Google last year, and it gives you a lot of options to be able to create different quality of audio from different locations. What we do is add a new resonance audio object and add it to our scene, but we can also define the dimensions of our room that we are creating and all of the qualities. For example, it could be brick and bare. And if you go to their website, there are really great examples, and the audio experience that you get is really, really different. Once you set it and add it to your scene, you don't want to leave it in any place. Most of the time, what you want to do is attach it to an object. If it's coming from a bird, you attach it to the bird, so on and so forth. So I do have an example of this audio experience. It's really hard to try. I don't know if I should get Tara to volunteer for us, but it's not very easy to see what we have here because this is not a VR experience. But what we are trying to do here is with these crosshair that you see in the middle, that's where we are looking in our scene. And all of these boxes have different audio, which we don't have the capability, I believe. And if you hit any of the boxes with the bird voice, that's okay. We don't have to. Yeah, you do. don't want that. Okay, let's see. We'll try to do this. Okay, trying to do this brings us to also how to debug any applications, which is not very straightforward. What you can do is in Chrome DevTools, go for More Tools and choose Remote Devices, which, right here. Okay. Now, it should discover my connection, and I should be able to see it on my device, or at least control it on my device. But no luck, it's not rendering. The demo gods are not with us. Another thing that you could do, if you don't want to constantly go back and forth with your device, is this developer tool, the extension that you can download, which gives you some options to move as the user. So now I can try to, oh, do you hear it? Yeah. Yes. So it's really hard to get it from here, but the point of the game is when you have this experience, you hear these voices randomly and you're trying to find where they're coming from. I do have a daydream. If you never try any VR experiences, or if you want to try this game, come find me after the talk. And I have a few other resources for you prepared at the end of the slides. The WebXR API proposal is one of them, and it's open source on GitHub. And if you are interested in creating any experiences with the web APIs, please be part of the conversation. Now is the time to give your feedback. Mozilla blog has been great, and I have a whole list of some of the tools that you can find and give it a try. And we have an AR experience here. Okay. I don't know if I will be able to show you this, but you can scan the QR code and go to the experience. And what you need to do is show it a hero image, which is the image on the right side. And then you will be able to see a 3D image rendered on top of it. So this is another way of rendering an AR experience without having to have the surface detection. And you can put some hero images or create your own hero image with your own logo and put it into different places and render specific information in the right time in the right place. And that's it for me. And please do check out the code examples. I didn't want to go over more of them, but the concepts are in the slides. And you can go to WebVR examples, and on GitHub, you can find a little bit more. Thank you.